What is up, everybody? I am Get Flanked, and in today's video, we're going to take a trip down memory lane. We're going to go all the way back to 2017 and a time period in the game that I refer to as the mad scientist era of Rainbow Six Siege. Now, why do I want to talk about this time period of Rainbow Six Siege? Well, there's been a lot of discussion recently about the new operators coming into the game and feeling a bit weak, feeling like they don't have much of an impact immediately. And that hasn't always been the case. For anybody who is newer to the game and doesn't remember, it used to be that when the operators were introduced each season, they would completely take the meta of Rainbow Six Siege and throw it out the window, and it would usher in a new meta every single season. The game changed radically. And almost as a given, the operators would come into the game and be overpowered and then get nerfed down over time. That's been the case up until about halfway through year 3, I would say. That was the case, that the operators would come in strong and then get nerfed over time. Now, as we go along here, let me know in the comments, what do you prefer? Do you want to go back to the days that I'm going to refer to here as the mad scientist era, where the operators came in kind of crazy OP and then were nerfed down over time? Or do you like that we have more of a gradual progression of the meta now, where the operators come in more balanced and the meta changes more slowly? Also, if you pay attention to the gameplay in the background, you're going to see clips from this era that I'm referring to using these operators that were released over this 3-month period that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so let me paint a picture for you. The date is August 29th of 2017. It's the day that Operation Blood Orchid is going to be released. And for the previous 6 months, Rainbow Six Siege players have been playing the same meta and the same operators for the most part. And the reason for that is because Operation Health was a thing, okay? And for anybody who's not been playing the game long enough to remember, Operation Health actually canceled a previously scheduled normal season, okay? And instead of having a normal season, they'd had Operation Health, where there were no new operators released, and they really just focused on fixing different aspects of the game. Okay, so from the release of Operation Velvet Shell, which was year 2, season 1, for the next 6 months, there were no new operators, no new maps, or anything like that. There were slight tweaks. I want to say during that time period is when Glaz got his thermal scope, if I'm remembering that correctly. But for the most part, the meta, everything stayed the same. And it was a really stale, kind of quiet time in Rainbow Six Siege. But with the release of Operation Blood Orchid, that quiet time is over. And in all honesty, the next 2 seasons, Blood Orchid and White Noise, completely changed Rainbow Six Siege as a game forever. Let's talk about Operation Blood Orchid first. And I will say in the beginning here, I, to this day, don't think that there has been another season that has been released that has had as much of an instant impact on the meta as Operation Blood Orchid. And just to go over some of the highlights here. First of all, you got 3 new operators introduced because Operation Health canceled out another season where we were supposed to get 2 new operators. In order to make up for that, they released 3 new operators over the next 2 seasons. So Operation Blood Orchid was that first season where we were getting 3 new operators instead of the normal 2. Those 3 new operators were Ella, Ying, and Legion. Now, the Ella and Ying that you know today are shells of their former selves, okay? They are not nearly as strong as they were upon release. Just to kind of give you an idea of how strong Ella and Ying were on release, I'll say this. Of those 3 operators, Legion was the weakest. You see, when Ella was originally released, she had a 50-round mag in that Scorpion, okay? That Scorpion had 0 recoil, by the way. It also did more damage, okay? So they've nerfed that Scorpion significantly since release. Ella also had 4 Grismont mines compared to the 3 that she has now, and those Grismont mines were also stronger. They've nerfed those Grismont mines in certain aspects over time. She also had impact grenades, okay? And if you take the average player that today mains like the Twitch and the Jaeger, that player was playing Ella at the time. They were running around and just drop-shotting everything because drop-shotting was still a thing in the game. And that one operator in Ella could completely dominate defenses. I mean, it was a nightmare. It honestly was. If you look back at the entire history of Rainbow Six Siege, I would say that Ella is second only to Blackbeard as far as being an overpowered at release operator. Blackbeard was released originally with that 800 HP shield, which is absolutely ridiculous to think about now. But when Ella was released, she was definitely the second strongest operator that's ever been released in this game. Now, as far as Ying, the big change to Ying was that she was originally released with smokes as one of her gadgets that she could bring with her. She had smokes and breaching charges available to her. And that changed Ying completely as an operator, okay? Because around this time period is when they also changed the way that smokes work. They made smokes much more cloudy, okay? It used to be that smokes were really unreliable. Like a lot of times you would throw a smoke, and because of the way that it propagated, you would be able to see through it and the enemy wouldn't be able to. It was just really unreliable. Well, they changed smokes at this time to make them more dependable, and when they did that, they made them much stronger. It was a huge buff to the smoke grenade. So Ying gets released with her candelas and smokes, and what you saw there was this crazy operator that was really easy to execute with. You would get around the site, you would throw the smokes would completely block vision, and then you could throw the candelas, which would blind the enemies as well as make them deaf and not be able to hear the plant, and it just made executes really, really heavy. Now, I mentioned Glaz earlier, having the ability to see through the smoke. That was another aspect that was really strong at this time. So with Ying coming into the game, you had an operator with the candelas that would aid in execution as well as those smokes, and it just made defenses really, really fearful of that Ying. Like, Ying was a completely different operator at this time. Now, Legion is the operator of these three that were released for Blood Orchid that probably most resembles the way he was upon release. They've nerfed him a little bit. I think they took away the one total goo mine that he could accumulate, and they changed like the recharge time of the goo mines a little bit. But for the most part, Legion is the same that he was upon release. The big deal with Legion and Ella, for that matter, is that you doubled the amount of trap operators in the game. And in a blink of an eye, you went from the only two trap operators in the game being Capkin and Frost to now having twice as many trap operators with Legion and Ella. And that changed things. That was definitely a change because Capkin at that time wasn't as strong as he is now. His Capkin traps worked differently. Yes, they were lethal, but they were much easier to see, and he had fewer of them. So yeah, it definitely changed things from the perspective of, having twice as many trap operators. It made life much more difficult for the attacking side. Now, I believe Operation Blood Orchid rollout is when they removed ACOG from Bandit and Jaeger as well. Okay, so that was a huge change. I mean, it's been talked about a lot. I'm not going to go into that, but needless to say, removal of Bandit, Jaeger, ACOG was a huge change, and a change that is honestly still being talked about to this day. So it's very easy to see there that in basically the blink of an eye, the game of Rainbow Six Siege completely changed. It was honestly like playing a completely new game at that time, but we're not done yet. Fast forward to December 5th, 2017, just a little over 3 months later, and you get 3 more new operators introduced into the game. Those operators were Vigil, Dokkaebi, and Zofia. Now, just the fact that you're getting 6 new operators introduced into the game in a span of a little over 3 months is enough to radically change the meta. But when you factor in who those operators were, that is a whole nother conversation. So, okay, in the span of a little over 3 months, 6 new operators. Those operators were Ying, Legion, Ella, Dokkaebi, Vigil, and Zofia. Now, I already talked about how strong the Blood Orchid operators were at release, how much stronger Ella and Ying were on release. Keep in mind, Zofia, when she was released, her lifeline had 4 of the concussion projectiles and 2 of those impacts. She was an ADS burning machine herself. She, by herself, with that lifeline, could burn 2 ADSs. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but keep in mind that when you have a Ying that can throw candelas and smokes, and Glaz that can see through those smokes, ADSs were pretty important gadgets at this time. They still are, but even more so at this time. They were really the only defense to this smoke candela execute. Now, Dokkaebi was also a stronger operator release for a couple of different reasons. The first thing that comes to mind is that on release, the SMG-12, you could argue, was the best gun on defense. The SMG-12 had significantly less recoil than it currently has, and with that fire rate, the SMG-12 was just a headshot machine. And also keep in mind that Dokubi's phone calls did not turn off at that time. That's been a recent change. When Dokubi would call you at this time, your phone would ring until you physically turned it off, no matter what. Now, she didn't have those frag grenades, but we've already mentioned how strong those smokes were at this time. So her having the smokes was also a strong aspect. And also the fact that she was the first global operator introduced into the game. So that was something new that we'd never dealt with before. And it really, Dokubi was a stronger operator on release than she currently is. So that's the mad scientist era of Rainbow Six Siege that I refer to. And again, just to recap, we went as players from having a 6-month stale meta, for the most part, to the game completely changing forever in a span of just over 3 months. And the question that I have for you guys is, what do you think about that? Was that a good thing? There's no argument that this game took a step during Operation Blood Orchid. It went to the next level during Operation Blood Orchid as far as popularity. And it's one that I wonder, is it a result of the radical, overpowered operators? Is it a result of the game feeling completely different every season? Is that a better thing for this game? I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm going to be reading through your comments. I'm interested to see what you say. I know from a pro perspective that it was really tough for the pros at this time to deal with these radical swings in the meta that they went through. And I think it's definitely better from a high-level competitive standpoint right now that the meta changes at a more gradual pace. But my goodness, whenever I look back on this mad scientist era, there was a lot of fun, okay? There was a lot of frustration as well. But it was really exciting that every season this game was completely different. And I kind of look back at it very fondly. I'm not saying I want it back, but there were some good aspects to it as well. Okay, guys, that's going to do it for the video. That's the trip down memory lane. I think maybe in summary, the best is maybe a balance of the mad scientist era with where we're at currently. I'd like to see the operators maybe come in a little bit stronger than the past 2 seasons, but probably not anywhere near the level of strength that we had during that mad scientist era. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you like and subscribe, and I'll have more coming your way here soon.